What would Martin Luther King Jr. think of Donald Trump? What would he have said about Donald Trump during the presidential campaign if he had not been assassinated in the middle of the presidential campaign of 1968? Dr. King would be 88 years old today, and we are left to wonder what he would say about Donald Trump, as we have been left to wonder what he would say about everything since April 4th, 1968. Here is one possibility of what Martin Luther King Jr. would have said if he had been alive to witness the Trump presidential campaign.
He is definitely an unacceptable candidate. I think in foreign policy, he sets forth an idea which can very easily plunge the whole civilized world into the abyss of annihilation. I think on domestic issues generally, he gives a philosophy that is out of harmony with the 20th century. And in civil rights, I think he articulates a philosophy which serves to give aid and comfort to the racists.
Aid and comfort to the racists. Standing with Martin Luther King Jr. when he said that was his then junior partner in the civil rights movement, John Lewis.
Good conscience, I don't see how any decent American could support a man like Barry Goldwater. He's a man who would rally people around hatred, people like the Ku Klux Klan, members of the White Citizen Council, and the John Birch Society.
Barry Goldwater was the 1964 Republican nominee for president. He lost in a landslide to Lyndon Johnson, but he was strongly supported in that campaign by Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, both of whom would go on to win their own presidential campaigns. Martin Luther King Jr. would most likely have seen the same faults in Donald Trump that he saw in Barry Goldwater. He would likely have objected to Donald Trump's foreign policy, as he did to Goldwater's, and to Donald Trump's giving aid and comfort to the racists, which Donald Trump had energetically been doing for 5 years before he became the Republican nominee by advancing an endless stream of lies about President Obama's birth.
3 weeks ago, I thought he was born in this country. Right now, I have some real doubts. I have people that actually have been studying it, and they cannot believe what they're finding.
You have people now down there searching, I mean, in Hawaii?
Absolutely, and they cannot believe what they're finding.
Into that same home where Donald Trump launched his campaign of hatred and lies about President Obama's birth 5 years ago, Martin Luther King Jr.'s oldest son had to walk today. Every minute he was in Trump Tower today, Martin Luther King III was walking an invisible tightrope. He was there to try to convince Donald Trump to take a step, a small step, in the right direction on voting rights. And so he didn't want to say anything negative about Donald Trump. When he was leaving his meeting with Donald Trump, he was asked that question. That has become his lifelong burden. What would your father think?
On this day, what would your father's message be to President-elect Trump? What do you think your father's message would be to President-elect Trump?
This is the final answer I'm going to have, because I'm going to reiterate what I just said. I think my father would be very concerned about the fact that there are 50 or 60 million people living in poverty, and somehow we've got to create the climate for all boats to be lifted. In America, with a multi-trillion-dollar economy, $20 trillion almost, it's insanity that we have poor people in this nation. That's unacceptable. And when we work together, we know we can roll up our sleeves. There's nothing that we as Americans can't do. Thank you very much.
That was a tough tightrope to be on today. Martin Luther King III could have said everything that he could imagine his father saying about Donald Trump and then instantly lose any chance of influencing Donald Trump. But Martin Luther King III wants to encourage Donald Trump to find ways to provide cheap IDs, perhaps free passports or photos on Social Security cards, to people who don't have any photo IDs so that they will be able to comply with voter ID laws. He wants to enable more people to vote. That was one of his father's life's missions. That's why Martin Luther King III was at Trump Tower today. And so here's how he handled the question that he knew was coming about his father's friend, now a member of Congress, John Lewis.
Were you offended by the president-elect's tweet that Representative Lewis is all talk and no action?
Well, first of all, I think that in the heat of emotion, a lot of things get said on both sides. And I think that at some point, you know, I am, as John Lewis and many others are, a bridge builder. The goal is to bring America together and Americans. We are a great nation, but we must become a greater nation. And what my father represented, my mother represented through her life, what I hope that I'm trying to do is always bring people together.
32 other members of Congress are joining John Lewis in his announced boycott of the Trump inauguration ceremony, a boycott that is likely to be felt by television networks now that Donald Trump is the most unpopular president to be inaugurated since the invention of polling. He has the lowest approval rating of any president on Inauguration Day, polling now in a Gallup poll at 40%. Here's Congressman John Lewis today at a scholarship breakfast for young African-American men.
If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know where I would be. I could still be down there in rural Alabama, maybe preaching to chickens. If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I wouldn't be a member of the House of Representatives since 1987. If it hadn't been for Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know what would have happened to our nation. He freed us. He helped liberate us, to make our nation a better place, to make our world a better place.
Joining us now, Jonathan Capehart, Pulitzer Prize-winning opinion writer for The Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Also with us, Mark Thompson, host of Make It Plain on Sirius XM Radio. And Jonathan, I don't really presume to lead this discussion today. I'd like to get your reactions to where we stand tonight in this controversy between John Lewis, Donald Trump, and on this anniversary of Martin Luther King Day.
Well, when it comes to the set two between Congressman John Lewis and President-elect Trump, I think we can get bogged down in the distraction of the battle between the two of them and lose sight of the fact that you have a president-elect who is doing battle with a sitting member of Congress. And, you know, there are contentious relationships here in this city. That's not what's new. What is new is a president-elect and soon-to-be president who cannot let any slight go. And so any criticism, any negative critique of him will be met with, from him, with sort of devastating insult and impact via Twitter and other means. And at some point, as everyone for months have been waiting for Donald Trump to act presidential, if there ever was a moment, if there ever was a day, if there ever was a person for whom that could happen, it was today, Martin Luther King Day, and with Congressman Lewis, and yet he didn't do that. And when it comes to Martin Luther King III, as with other people, particularly African Americans, Steve Harvey comes to mind in particular, the idea that everyone's trooping to Trump Tower in a rational exercise to deal with and talk to the incoming president of the United States, when that person has shown in multiple ways that he is nice to your face, and then the moment you walk out of the room, he's not. He'll go after you on Twitter, and what he promises to do for you in that room could change at a moment. And that's why I've been telling people to not necessarily listen to what Donald Trump says, but to pay attention exactly to what he does. And that is going to become paramount at 12:01 on January 20th.
Mark, your reactions and feelings today.
Well, first of all, and happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day, Lawrence, and thanks for having me. I think that John Lewis is deserving of all the respect that we can give him. He was bloodied on our behalf. We would not be able to vote if it weren't for him. He's the conscience of the Congress, and he's an American hero. If John Lewis said that I am not legitimate, I'd have to go look in the mirror. He might be justified because of his stature. He was an apostle of Dr. King. I don't know what's worse, Donald Trump lashing out at him and insulting him the way he did, or the rumors we're hearing that tweet is just his standard boilerplate template for all black elected officials, and that he may not have known who John Lewis was at the time. They're both pretty equal, but neither one is good. For someone to have questioned the legitimacy of President Obama for over 5 years throughout most of his administration, he's in no place to challenge John Lewis in terms of questioning his legitimacy. And even if we put Russia aside, that excellent quote, that excellent clip of Dr. King that you played is directly applicable to Donald Trump because he has given aid to confident racists. So even if we didn't know about Russia, that questions his very legitimacy. As far as my dear friend Martin III, I spoke with Dr. James Forbes, a former pastor of Riverside Church, which was a job Dr. King actually coveted before he was called to Montgomery. He wanted to come here and pastor Riverside and teach. He was in the meeting, Dr. Forbes, and he said to me, and this is the difference between the meeting Steve Harvey and other entertainers had too, Jonathan. They went in there with a demand.
Yes, they did.
Which is what Dr. King did. He didn't go meet with presidents without a demand. And so they went with a demand, and Dr. Forbes also said Martin III felt that he had a responsibility, especially on his father's birthday, to inform Donald Trump what would be expected of him by Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, I get it. It was a difficult tightrope, and I understand why he was there, and I understand why he handled it the way he did. I also understand Jonathan's point about, you know, you got to be careful about who you're talking to there. To the question of Donald Trump even knowing the history of some of what he's been embroiled in all weekend, he apparently knows nothing about heroes. He was asked in this new interview in the London Sunday Times, does he have any heroes? And the question was put to him throughout human history, anyone in human history that he could think of. And listen to this answer from Donald Trump. Well, I don't like heroes. I don't like the concept of heroes. The concept of heroes is never great, but certainly you can respect certain people, and certainly there are certain people. But I've learned a lot from my father. My father was a builder in Brooklyn and Queens. He did houses and housing, and I learned a lot about negotiation from my father. Also a lot about negotiation as a natural trait. I don't think you can, either you have it or you don't. You better get, you're better at it, but basically, you get better at it, but basically people that I know who are great negotiators, are great salesmen, are great politicians, it's very natural, very natural. I got a letter from somebody, their congressman. They said that what you've done is amazing because you were never a politician and you beat all the politicians. He said they added it up. When I was 3 months into the campaign, they added up, and I had 3 months of experience, and the 17 guys I was running against, the Republicans, had 236 years. You know, when you add 20 years and 30 years, and so I was 3 months in, and they were 236 years, and so it's sort of funny article, but I believe it's like hitting a baseball or being a good golfer. Natural ability, to me, is much more important to me than experience, and experience is a great thing, and I think it's a great thing, but I learned a lot from my father in terms of leadership. That is Donald Trump's comment about the entire human history of leadership or heroes, Jonathan Capehart. The only two people he can mention in Ascension about the question about heroes are himself mostly, and a glancing reference to his father.
Right, well, a little more than a glancing reference to his father, but I mean, we've heard this before. He reveres his father, but he reveres himself more. And he can't possibly imagine that there's anyone else in human history who has shown any kind of leadership or shown any ability that is worthy of reverence. We are sitting here in this country living among living legends, and one of them is Congressman Lewis. And one thing I forgot to mention in my comments to your first question, and that I have another member of Congress to add to the 33 that you noted are not coming to Donald Trump's inauguration, and that is California Congresswoman Karen Bass, who on Sunday, yesterday, took to Facebook Live to ask her constituents whether she should come to Washington to the inauguration. And I learned from her tonight that she is staying in her district through Sunday. So what we're seeing here are members of Congress who are staying away as a show of conscience, and for a lot of them, it's a show of leadership in terms of leading their constituents and what they want. And then the day after the inauguration, we're going to see lots of people come to Washington in their way to show leadership and taking ownership of their own futures.
Yeah, so breaking news from Jonathan Capehart with Karen Bass. We now have a total of 34 members of Congress, Mark Thompson, who are openly boycotting this inauguration. And it's going to be really a two-day event in that what happens on Saturday in the protest is a response to what's going on Friday.
Absolutely. And if Dr. King were alive and if Coretta Scott King were alive, I have no doubt that they would be there.
You think you know which day they would be there?
Well, they'll be there on Saturday, and I intend to be there on Saturday to support the Women's March. So yes, that's where Dr. King would be. And even in all of this, what Martin did today, what John Lewis is doing, these are the things that Dr. King would be doing if he were alive.
Jonathan Capehart, Mark Thompson, thank you both for joining us on this important day. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence.